What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. You know me, I'm Dave Smith, and you know him, Robbie the Fire Bernstein. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and my friends, I am home. I'm cranking out content. Go follow the channels. Robbie the Fire on all socials. Put out multiple sketches over the weekend. I've revamped the Run Your Mouth intros, having a good time while I'm home. So go subscribe, like, do the things.
Make sure, guys, go support Robbie in all of his projects, and it's all hilarious and great. So go check that out. And then, of
Get
course,
ready for Boozman. I've been doing squats in the living room. I'm trying to get these legs ready to ski after the fall I took this summer. So hopefully.
I've been getting complaints, not since Spokane have I gotten so many complaints about the way I pronounce a city. But Bozeman, I thought that was right. But anyway, whatever. I guess
What's
not.
it supposed to be?
Well, if I knew that, then I wouldn't be getting these complaints now, would I, Rob? However you say that, we will be there. So that's really what's important. We are coming there one night only. It is January 18th. So coming up soon, we'll be there. And then the following weekend, we'll be out in Louisville, Kentucky, and then Fort Wayne, Indiana. And then we got a bunch more stuff coming up. Key West, Houston, Buffalo, Boston, Chicago, Rosemont, San Diego, Appleton, Denver, Cleveland, Tacoma, Spokane, which I finally did figure out after many months of failing, Tampa, Florida, also dates that are not on the website, Denver, Providence, Austin, Texas. So a bunch of stuff. The ticket links are all coming together now. I think I just put out a flyer that was missing a few of the dates, but I saw people out there on Twitter. They were like, "Oh, I thought you were coming to Denver. It's not on the thing." We are coming to Denver. Don't worry. We're coming all over the place. There you go. Clip it for the gay comment. But comicdavesmith.com for all of those ticket links for the shows me and Rob are doing together, and the ones that are missing should be up very soon. All right. So, Rob, as well, maybe I'll start with this, but there's a couple topics that are kind of on the same broader theme, but I just look, obviously we do not on this podcast, and I speak for both of us when I say this, and I've always been clear about this. I've always been on record, and both of us have. We do not care about Canada. Mm-hmm. We don't care.
Not my focus.
It's just, come on. There's enough going on with the internal politics of the United States of America. I cannot reasonably be asked to keep up with Canada.
They're just whiter Mexicans. That's the way I see them.
Yeah. And, meaning they're a problem. Okay. And they have to be dealt with. However, there were two things. Okay. Number one, today, we are recording on January 6th, 2025. Today, Justin Trudeau resigned on January 6th. Okay, on January 6th, Justin Trudeau resigned from government. Also, this same day, the vote to certify the election of 2024 is being certified in Congress, in the Senate, and, which rarely happens, the vice president is technically the president of the Senate. And so Kamala Harris has, for the last few days, had to oversee her own election loss. I had not really thought about things in these terms, but it was, I guess, Al Gore is the last sitting vice president to run and lose. And so about 25 years ago, Al Gore was in the same situation. Anyway, all I'm saying is to our listeners out there, to see Kamala Harris having to oversee the certification of her own election defeat, and to see Justin Trudeau have to resign on January 6th, all I'm saying, Rob, is that there are still people out there who don't believe in God. And this is a rough day for you. This is how can you? I know there are bad things in the world. I know there's a lot to be depressed about, but how can you not look at that and go, clearly there is a higher being with a sense of humor guiding events of humanity? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, Trump gets to take a nice victory lap before showing up for hush money court, but yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. So, and when did they moved that back a few days, right? It was supposed to have already been done, but then the judge insisted that he come. And now, from last I read, his lawyers are trying to get it. Trump's lawyers, that is, are trying to get it pushed back further. But we'll see what happens with all that. I
My
think
guess is it's just not going to be all that consequential. Everyone was aware of the court case. People voted for him anyways. It's kind of cartoonish. The guy has a job to go do now, so I don't know why formally sentencing him with some sort of a slap in the wrist helps him on the way into the presidency. But on the same note, it's kind of like I was advocating for, even if Fauci gets a pardon, let's prosecute him anyways. So from that judge's opinion, even if this guy's let off the hook because he's got presidential immunity, we should formally hand him a punishment.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I'm with you on that one. Let's go. So, like, a few, I guess it's worth kind of, I think, kind of talking about just a couple things on Trudeau and on January 6th. So, first of all, I was celebrating a bit on Twitter about Justin Trudeau, stepping down, and
I hope he ends up working a glory hole for those truckers.
Well, that would be perhaps a fair punishment. I'm not holding my breath on that one.
I don't know if that's a punishment to him.
Well done. But it really is like, I had people tweeting to me. They're like, no, the move he just pulled is actually prolonging his party's rule in government, and then talking about how his opponent is really bad too, and all of this stuff. And I'm not claiming to have any level of knowledge about Canadian politics. I just don't follow it, and I'm already I already have my work cut out for me just being up to date on the stuff that we talk about. So it is what it is. But I would just say from the perspective of someone, a U.S. citizen observing Canada, I'm not saying, because I'm not saying like I am up to date on what's happening, and I don't know. Maybe all of that is true, what people are saying on Twitter. But from my perspective, there is something invaluable about the guy who oversaw the COVID insanity in Canada, which was, believe it or not, quite a bit more insane than the United States of America's COVID insanity. Maybe you could say it was on par with the worst parts of America. So the ones that overreacted the most. It was a country of Los Angeles or a country of New York City or something like that. But the guy who so clearly, invoked emergency powers to confiscate, or should I say confiscate, to freeze the bank accounts, not just of the truckers who were protesting, but of people who were accused of financially supporting the truckers, with no due process, mind you. So on the accusation, your bank account was frozen. It was truly one of the most chilling and tyrannical policies in the civilized world, certainly in my lifetime, probably quite a bit more than that. And just to see that guy's, I was going to say presidency, but I guess that's the wrong word, but to see his term end in like a humiliating embarrassment is invaluable. It's great. And that, I'm not claiming to know any more about it than that, but I do know what he was doing during COVID, and it is wonderful to see him, have to make that speech announcing that he's stepping down. Screw that guy. That's really all the extent of what I have to say about it. Any thoughts on the late Prime Minister Trudeau?
Well, I won't miss him, except I will miss when random people kind of psych him out and go, "Oh my God, Trudeau!" And then he gets all excited, "Hey, and then they go, "You're a fucking dickhead!" And then he has to just scurry off because every time he gets excited that he's being recognized and he thinks he's a well-liked celebrity. So I will miss that. COVID regime, all that nonsense. But it seems like Trump just collected his first soul, and that perhaps his tariff plays might actually work out, or some of them. Maybe this will invigorate him of, look how good my tariffs are, and then they'll backfire. But it seems like he's 1-0 against world leaders and threatening tariffs, and that he just cost someone their job. So in terms of inflicting pain for concessions, and then understanding that, world leaders are just kind of looking out for their best interests. It seems like he just took one out.
Yeah, no, it's certainly, look, if nothing else, that it can certainly be spun that way, and it just looks good for Donald Trump. Whether fairly or unfairly, perhaps had Trump not won, everything would have happened exactly the same as it did happen. But either way, in the same way that it's not exactly fair that Donald Trump getting shot in the earlobe, makes him look so badass the same week that Biden looked so old and frail. Nonetheless, that's the appearance, and that's the reality that we're living in. And like, there's no question that it's not just Trump threatening them with tariffs and stuff, but it's Donald Trump publicly floating out the idea that they could become the 51st state, just totally like chopping Trudeau's balls off in the public negotiation, which Trump really is a master at that. It's him having to resign after that. The appearances just are what they are, and I see every MAGA influencer taking a victory lap on this, and I must admit, it's pretty entertaining to watch. So whether or not it was exactly Donald Trump's accomplishment, it sure is going to play that way, and it sure does make him look great and make the entire it's a blow to the entire progressive establishment, those who branded themselves the resistance under Donald Trump's first 4 years. It's just a huge blow to all of them, that so many, and I've found this to be, it's an interesting theme, how many of these people who are like heroes of the progressive resistance of Donald Trump, it's the shortest reign. I mean, they're like heroic, and then they just collapse. And then when you look back at it, you can't believe that anybody ever thought they were that thing. During COVID, there were a lot of these. Obviously, Andrew Cuomo, Fauci himself. I mean, Fauci was for a little while there a figure that was almost portrayed as above politics. This was just the expert. This was just the scientist. And now he's, at best, one of the most controversial figures. But there's just a lot of guys like this, and Trudeau really was one of them. It's interesting. When I say one of them, I mean, like, if you remember, Rob, because I used to make a big deal about this on the show because I just thought it was so hilarious and so revealing. But there was Michael Avenatti, I believe I'm saying his name correctly, but he was Stormy Daniels' lawyer. And for quite a while, the corporate media was touting him as a potential presidential candidate in 2020. And this was because he was going on the cable news shows, and he was like giving all the, he was like ruthlessly indicting Donald Trump on cable news. And of course he was doing this because his client was Stormy Daniels. She was trying to get money. She was trying to sue Donald Trump. He was being a lawyer, but they all just felt, and it's such a sick culture, and they're so removed from regular people that while they're celebrating him, it didn't seem to dawn on any of them that he was transparently a piece of shit. Like, just the guy was obvious. Anybody who, first of all, he's a fucking lawyer who's representing a porn star. I mean, try starting from a place of where you're more likely to be sleazy than that. You know what I mean? Like, the lawyer representing a porn star, by the way, not representing a porn star who was, assaulted or abused or taken advantage of, like a porn star who voluntarily slept with a guy and voluntarily accepted hush money payments and then broke the deal and now wants to, you know what I mean? Like, it was just, and he's of course just like, any normal person would take a look at him and be like, yo, that is the slimiest person I've ever seen. But it didn't matter because they're so blinded by their hatred of Trump, and they also don't have normal values. And so they were just like, oh, this guy's great. And then I forget, what was it? He ended up going to jail for some shit. Like, it was just like, oh, what a shock. That slime ball is a slime ball, And there were lots of other examples of stuff like this. The other one that I love to use was Beto O'Rourke. If you remember, Beto O'Rourke was being touted for a while by the corporate media as the one with the, quote, it factor. That's what they kept saying. He's got that it factor. He's just young and cool. And I mean, like a normal person looks at him for 5 seconds, and at the very least you go, he's the biggest dork on the planet. Like, guy is just not, no, he's going to take Texas. Like, what? This is just not going to happen.
More like the ick factor. Boom, boom, boom.
There you go. There you go, Rob. Robbie the Fire. But right, like it was, there's something, and Trudeau was one of those guys too. Like, it's like they, there's a weird thing. I remember, like, okay, I'm showing my age here, but I remember being a little kid. I was a very little kid, but I was a little kid through the height of Vanilla Ice. Okay? So Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby, was like a huge hit song. He became, for a brief moment there, like the #1 selling rapper of all time. Rap had never really like crossed over to the mainstream the way it did when Vanilla Ice came out. Back then there were like big rappers. I think the biggest was MC Hammer. And then there were other people who, like, today you might actually consider a rapper. Like, no one today I don't think is really, like, who's into hip hop is talking about MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice. But there were like LL Cool J and Big Daddy Kane and guys like that. But they were much smaller. They didn't sell the records that, like, anyway. So Vanilla Ice is just this huge thing. And then it was like, I swear it felt like one person made fun of how he's corny. And then everyone just went, oh yeah. Oh yeah, he is really corny. And that was the end of it. It was like he went from being the #1 guy to being a punchline, like seemingly overnight. At least this was the perspective of a 6-year-old. Anyway, there is something about guys like Trudeau and guys like Beto O'Rourke, where it's almost like the media can come in and be like, no, this is the really cool, like young, hip guy. And then it takes one person to go like, he's a fucking dork, before everyone's like, oh yeah, he is a dork. Anyway, I just thought Trudeau really was one of these guys who the media was presenting as like, he's brilliant and handsome and young, and oh, if only America could have a leader like this leader. And I don't know. I find it to be incredibly positive that he goes out looking like a chump and not like whatever they were trying to make him into. Also, he might be Castro's kid. I'm not sure about that, but he might be. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Tax Network USA. Do you owe back taxes? Are your tax returns still unfiled? Did you miss the deadline to file for an extension on October 15th? The IRS may be ramping up enforcement. You could face wage garnishment, frozen bank accounts, or even property seizure if you haven't taken action yet. But there's still hope. Tax Network USA has helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt and has filed over 10,000 tax returns. They specialize in helping people like you reduce their tax burdens, and they can help you too. Don't wait any longer. Visit tnusa.com/Smith or call 1-800-958-1000 for a free consultation. Their experts will walk you through a few simple questions to see how much you can save. Act now before the IRS takes more aggressive steps. Take control today by going to tnusa.com/Smith or calling 1-800-958-1000. That's tnusa.com/Smith or 1-800-958-1000. All right, let's get back into the show. Any thoughts on Castro, on the late Fidel Castro's baby boy?
No, but it's nice to see what feels like the end of the woke era just unraveling, and this being one of the victims of them unable to, sell that horse shit to us.
Yep, I completely agree. On topic of that, because I do think the things are related, it'd be hard to not talk about it all today. The 4th anniversary of January 6th is, it really is something. How much, at least it seems, again, it is difficult to get a gauge of exactly the temperature. Obviously, like, so much of, our world is our world. And, people, somebody, I was actually talking with a friend of mine the other day who had, he was accused by someone of living in a bubble. And we were talking about that, like what that accusation really means, what it means to say someone lives in a bubble. And I was saying to him that I think if we're being honest, we kind of all live in bubbles to some degree. Obviously some more than others, and some live in different bubbles. But there's no question that, like, Rob, me and you, when we go out and do live shows, it's predominantly for people who listen to this show. And on social media and things like that, your algorithm is feeding you who you interact with. And so you kind of get a view of your world. It's a little bit tougher. It's part of the reason why I still do keep my eye on the corporate media and why I do try to consume other media, because you want to keep a perspective on what this group is thinking or what this group is thinking. It does seem to me, and I'm sure part of this is my own bias and my own algorithm, it does seem to me that the myth of January 6th has been tremendously diminished. And part of that is the fact that the Democrats and the corporate media went so all in on it, and it failed, and this wasn't enough to remove Donald Trump. But the other thing is just that I think the truth comes out, and I think that America has had real problems over the last 4 years, and so it's very hard to sell that this problem, which is an imaginary one, outranked all of those other real problems. And the more the truth comes out, and the more footage comes out, and the more just the other problems persist for years and years, it does seem to me to be so different the way people are looking back at January 6th now compared to the way it was portrayed on that day and in the following couple of years afterward. It's just, obviously a lot of things play a role in that. The extra footage that Tucker Carlson put out played a big role in this. But man, it's hard to not notice like what a difference 4 years makes, where it does seem to essentially be a punchline at this point. It does seem to almost just be like a joke of remember when that funny thing happened 4 years ago, compared to what the media tried to make it over the last 4 years.
Well said. It's like microaggressions. They're a luxury good if you can start concerning yourself with microaggressions. So I think you're 100% right that there are enough other problems. We weren't going to pretend like it's like kind of goes back to the Charlottesville thing where they were selling us that there was this racist tide and that's the issue in the country. And it's like, my God, who realized that we could defeat Nazis with stale urine? If only they'd had that during World War II. Speaking of the January 6th thing and how much they were trying to sell it, they were trying to create a domestic terrorism title that they were hoping to further, apply censorship to the internet because, oh my God, we've got a problem with domestic terrorists. And they tried to make it that Donald Trump wouldn't be able to rerun for office. And all of those efforts have failed. And it's wild to think that just 4 years after that, probably greatest comeback ever. They'll be, announcing they'll be certifying the election results, and Donald Trump will have his opportunity to pardon a lot of these political prisoners, and hopefully he'll make good on that because I think they were pretty. I think anyone who didn't engage in violence that day was definitely wrongfully prosecuted, and even some of the ones that maybe did, I wonder to what extent they might have been provoked by government influences, and people can get wrapped into the spirit of a crowd.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like, there's a few things there on what you just said that are all great points. But so number one, it really, and Charlottesville is a great other example. I remember when Joe Biden, he had the, his commercial or whatever, a video where he announced that he was running for president. So this would be in 2019. And he opened with Charlottesville. That was his opening thing. And I remember me and you just ruthlessly mocking it because we were like, yo, wait, what? Your opening thing here is Charlottesville happened? And that was, that was 2 years ago, dude, Like it was 2 years ago. It was in 2017, right? I think Charlottesville happened. And then the following year they came back and no one came. There were 20 people there. When Charlottesville happened, there were a couple hundred people there. And then I think maybe a couple thousand counter protesters. But the idea that that in any way like was a real issue that Americans cared about, like it's just so removed from reality. And in a lot of ways, January 6th, it was a similar type of thing where it to the progressive sensibilities, it's almost like the worst crime imaginable that you could commit. You know, the worst crime is like, you know, shouting, you know, white nationalist slogans or something like that. And the worst crime would be like, you know, breaking some windows at the Capitol building, because it's like people who are very, you know, frankly privileged, who have this kind of, you know, I get it. Sorry, I'm just remembering all this stuff. But do you remember there was one point where Andrea Mitchell, of course, if you guys don't know her, is a longtime NBC News reporter. And she's married to Alan Greenspan, who was the longtime chairman of the Federal Reserve. And I remember she was talking about when Donald Trump's "Grab Him by the Pussy" tape first came out, and she had this clip where she was saying that she was talking to like her husband and one of her male friends, and that they both told her that they were appalled and that they didn't know any men who ever spoke that way. And I remember talking about it being like, this is more of a comment on the men that Andrea Mitchell is around than it is on men. Like she was like, because I'm just saying, like, it's frankly, like, if there is not one job site in the United States of America that you could walk onto and find one guy who would look you in the eyes and go, I've never heard men talk about pussy before. Like, that's just...
I don't know that anyone's used that turn of phrase, but because Donald Trump's kind of funny and creative, but...
Yes, but like, it's not the idea that you've never heard anything like that of guys talking. It's just like, it's ridiculous. And so there is this culture that is very removed from working class culture or American culture. It's a culture of, say, like, elite low T men, you know, like, I don't know what else to say. Like, it's this culture where your feelings being hurt, being offended is the thing that matters the most. That's not how most people live their lives. And most people, in fact, it's only when you don't have real problems that those problems ever get up to the top of your hierarchy of outrages. You know, you just, as a point I've made many, many times, but you can't walk into the hood, you can't walk into a job site, you can't walk into a trailer park, you can't go to any of those places and find people who are offended by something someone said. There's just too much real shit going on. And that's their biggest issue. Not whatever, you know what I mean? It's just not any of this. And so there is something where, you know, the corporate media and the Democrats and the progressive establishment, they have failed so much on almost all meat and potatoes issues that they have nothing they can even really point to. And so instead, what they've attempted to do over the last few years is distract everybody and try to convince them that they should also have these infractions at the top of their hierarchy of outrages. So, like, you know, yes, inflation sucks, it's a problem, it's coming back down, but January 6th. But like, to anybody who's living on a fixed income, it's like, forget about January 6th. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this problem. And the other point you made was about how much they tried to do after January 6th. And that really can't be overstated. I mean, they tried to straight up launch a domestic war on terrorism in their own words. This is what they claimed. Over January 6th, they tried to remove a presidential candidate off of January 6th. There was no limit to what they were trying. And again, much like all of these things, it was very largely based on lies. Like, the original story of what came out of January 6th is just not what really happened. There were a ton of lies surrounding the thing, as is almost always the case with these events that governments try to use in order to crack down on their citizens' liberties. Let's go to the video of the it was the Glenn Greenwald clip that or the Glenn Greenwald tweet that I sent you, Natalie. I believe this was the first, or no, I think it's the second one I sent you today, because this was great.
We'll find it.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the hours-long attack.
They beat a Capitol police officer to death with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the fight.
He died at the age of 42 after he was bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher.
We'll find it.
Okay, so that was, I guess, a clip Glenn Greenwald had used from the old Tucker Carlson show on Fox News. So again, this was just one of the claims. There were many different claims repeated by Joe Biden himself that multiple police officers there died. By the way, this stuff there, and this has all come out and been widely reported. I mean, I know. Shoot, is there a date on this? Yeah, there was an article as of April 19th of 2021. So this is only a few months after January 6th, by NPR that ran the whole thing. NPR, not exactly a right-wing outlet, that was mentioning that the medical examiner ruled that the cop died of natural causes. On the videos, now this is not the videos that were initially released, but they're damn sure part of the videos that Liz Cheney had her hands on. You can see after the incident where he's beaten to death with a fire extinguisher, the cop is back up and walking around. He was hospitalized after the event and, according to the medical examiner, died of natural causes. So yes, it is true. Like the way Nicole Wallace there on the clip we just played, she said he was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. Okay, that's a blatant lie. And then it was, who was it? Anderson Cooper, who did a little bit better and said he died after being beaten with a fire extinguisher. And you're like, all right, that part is maybe a little more technically true, but it's kind of like one of those died after getting COVID, you know what I mean? Like, yes, one happened and the other happened, or at least I don't know that he was actually hit with a fire extinguisher. We saw kind of a melee there, but no, the two were not related. And so there was a huge, much like with October 7th, much like, with a lot of these events, it's like there's a thing. Most people on its own will acknowledge that, like, okay, January 6th, yes, there were people who vandalized property. There were people who broke in. There were people who got into physical altercations with cops. Like, no one's denying that. But then they have to lie to overplay it so much worse than what the actual thing was. And then it becomes a thing where, like, if you question that at all, now you're downplaying the event, all in an effort to justify the next horrific policy that they want to push. The truth is, and this is just beyond dispute at this point, but the only people who died as a direct result of January 6th were Trump supporters. There was, I think, a couple who had heart issues. And then, of course, there was Ashley Babbitt, who was just gunned down, unarmed, by a police officer who just shot into a crowd of people and hit this girl in the neck and killed her. That's what happened on January 6th. Anyway, any thoughts, Rob?
Well, the Ashley Babbitt one, no, I agree with everything you just said. I don't really fault the officer, though. If you don't have, like, specific rulings and people are crashing through a door and you're in the Capitol building, I get making that bad decision.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I get what you're saying. At the same time, you're a police officer. You're supposed to be trained. And one of the things that was like, so like, I understand, I can relate to somebody panicking. The thing is, right, you'd think if you're a trained police officer and you've got a mob of people like coming, in the next room, to shoot one bullet into the mob of people just seems like like, what's that going to do? If they were like this crazy like group who is coming there just to kill you, they're still going to come do it. It's not like that's going to stop it. And you're just, I don't know. I would think that like maybe these guys could be a little bit better trained than that. But regardless, however you feel about the Ashley Babbitt situation, the fact is that this portrayal of like what happened here was that these people broke into the building and just beat a cop to death. That didn't happen. And there was a look, one of the funniest things about January 6th was that years later, sorry, go ahead.
The whole thing just, it's the bigger government ineptitude of that you can't half-ass things. So if you actually have people storming the Capitol building, you bring in the Capitol Police, you call the reinforcements. Like, I mean, I've seen movies when people are robbing a bank that's Washington, D.C. You could have made that phone call and you could have had the Army troops there. So when you're leaving people in the building and they're not sure whether or not they're supposed to be securing the building or what the protocol is, that's the stupidity of the situation. And to what extent the FBI was involved in terms of actually opening up doors and ushering people in. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of all bigger picture than that single cop. I'm saying being there with unclear orders, guarding a door and not sure what the hell's going on is...
I'm not really arguing with you on that. I understand the point that you're making. There is what was one of the things I remember me and you laughing about was that when Tucker Carlson released, it was right at the end of Tucker's run at Fox News, but when he released a bunch more of the footage that had never been seen before, one of the things that was immediately the line that Liz Cheney and everybody else in the corporate media would use is that Tucker is releasing deceptively edited portions of this, or he's being deceptive by cherry picking. They used to claim the footage that you're allowed to see. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was more flagrant than the cheap fakes thing, when you were seeing actual unedited footage of Biden, and then they were claiming that you were engaging in the typical news thing of giving you a select clip out of context. And so, I mean, what happened with Tucker, there should still be nationwide outrage for this. The fact that this story disappeared as quickly as it did is terrible. But from what I remember, from the Tucker Carlson footage is he received everything. And what he put out was one episode about the shaman. And we saw select clips, edited clips of the shaman that made him seem, I mean, to me, he was a goofball. But I could see to other people, hey, this guy's a ringleader, he's a dangerous character, and he was in jail. And then we saw the cops escorting him around the building, letting the guy take pictures, him outside afterwards telling people, Trump told us to leave, we have to leave, and being a nice goofball. And so instantly he gets let out of jail, and of course they go, oh, it has nothing to do with the footage that you've seen. It's because of he was going to be released anyways. How many other people would be out of jail if we saw all of that footage? And of course they had shown us edited clips and did exactly what you were describing, where they turn around and go, oh, by seeing more footage than what we edited and showed you, he's taking things more out of context. By adding more context, he's actually showing you footage that's more out of context. Please explain that paradox of the universe to me.
Well, it was so funny because it's like, oh, as always, you know, every accusation is a confession. They're always just letting you know what they did. And so the truth is that on January 6th, and then, I'm not exaggerating, every single day after that, in the corporate media, they would show you the same 15 video clips that we've all seen a million times. And these clips involved Trump supporters breaking windows, kicking down doors, climbing over up the building, and some melees that broke out, some fights that broke out between cops and Trump supporters. And so that's what you saw over and over and over again. And then you're kind of like trained your monkey brain to be like, that's what this event was. What this event was a bunch of pissed off Trump supporters who by force stormed the Capitol, assaulted police, did property damage. What we then saw, this is years later, right? So what we then saw with the other footage was like, oh, you actually saw barricades being removed by cops cops inviting people in, welcoming people in. You saw cops guiding people around while it's all going on. The interactions between the people inside and the cops were all very pleasant. They were thanking each other. They were, guiding each other around. And you started to realize that, like, okay. So there's, now not one single human being, and I mean this, not one, there is not one single human being in the world who saw those images that Tucker Carlson later released, but had never seen the images of the stuff in the beginning. So it's not as if it didn't undo what we had already seen. It just added more. It just gave more context where you would go, oh, okay, so now I'm getting a clearer picture here. This was partially a violent riot and also partially like a guided tour or something like that. It was not what the corporate media was trying to make it out to be. And so that now, in the case of the shaman, they actually put together the clips where you can see he didn't break in. He was not violent at all. He's being guarded. He's being walked around by cops. He was let into the chamber by cops, and he had very pleasant interactions with the police officers. And so what you realize when you actually put all of this together is that you go like, so wait a minute. So why would it be that this shaman guy became the face of January 6th? Why is it that his still image was the one that the entire corporate media ran with, when clearly you could see this guy at the very least was on friendly terms with the police there and was not himself being violent? And the answer is quite simple, because he looked like that. And he was dressed up like that, and that would be the scariest image. So what the corporate media did constantly was they show you the still frame of the shaman guy, and then they'd show you the video of some fight that broke out. The video of someone smashing windows, and then the still frame of the shaman guy. Go back and look at any of the compilations of the corporate media covering January 6th. They all did that. And simply because he's dressed like that, we could make you feel like this is weird and scary and threatening. That's the whole game. And it turns out, as you said, if you've seen, the guy's been in several interviews first, he's not a dummy. He certainly is not a violent criminal. He
went to too many hot yoga classes.
Yes, he's that guy. He's the guy who would dress like that. But the things he was talking about he seems like a guy who's done too much ayahuasca, is what it seems like. A guy who was sitting there telling the cops about how they're all lightness and good and we're all one, or something like that. That's more what it is. And so it's just these like manipulation tactics were totally revealed when you got more information. Okay, so I guess the other thing that just is worth pointing out about January 6th, which to me is just the most important part of all of it, is that the narrative that, what really happened here. Okay, sorry, there's a couple things. Number one, the other thing, because we just got this confirmed very recently, but then also that there were multiple, at least, informants at January 6th, which is something that has long been speculated about. Obviously, the most famous one is the Ray Epps
well, he's
thing.
He's not actually. He wasn't listed as one of the informants. That's a separate.
Yes.
Oddity.
It's a separate thing. I'm saying in terms of the skepticism of January 6th, the big one was this Ray Epps thing, where you have this big burly guy who's instructing everybody to storm the Capitol, while the rest of the group turns on him and starts chanting Fed at him because it's the most suspicious Fed behavior ever, and then is like all of a sudden, at the height of demonizing everyone involved in January 6th, all of the Democrats took his side and started talking about what a victim he was because the right-wing media had turned on him. It was a very bizarre chapter in all of this. And then, yes, a good point of clarification. Separately, there were other people who were listed as Fed informants who were there. And it does, look, at the very least, I don't want to I'm not trying to overstate what was revealed. It's not as if the government has come out and said, yes, there were agent provocateurs who were federal agents. That's not what they're claiming. But they are admitting that there were dozens of FBI informants there. And it's hard to know that and then not have your next logical question be, well, wait a minute. If you're telling me this was an insurrection, if you're telling me this was an attempt to overthrow the democratic processes of the United States of America, and you had dozens of informants there, how did you not know about this? And why was there not something, you know what I mean? Like, why wasn't this handled in a different way? Because, of course, the only way that a January 6th thing can even become what it was, let alone anything that could even remotely threaten to overthrow the United States of America's government, is if the government decides to not be prepared that day. Right? Nobody actually believes that a force capable of taking out the Metro Police existed there today. Forget, like, you know, bringing in the state troopers or the National Guard or the Air Force or the Army or anything like that, which is obviously all a joke, that any force of citizens could take them out. But what force could have possibly taken out just like the DC Metro Police who were there? No, it was a group of unarmed people. They're not taking anybody out. So if you had all these informants there, how the hell did you not know about this? How the hell were you not prepared? There's still 4 years later, a lot more questions than answers when it comes down to what the hell actually happened on January 6th. And the questions do seem to be pointing in one direction, that there was significant government involvement. You know, look, with things like this, it's always has been the Achilles heel of protest movements, is that all it takes is a few people being real violent before you could make the whole thing look pretty damn violent. And so anyway, and then just the broader point being that the way it was portrayed in the media as if this was a legitimate threat to overthrow the United States of America's government or something like that has always been just cartoonishly idiotic. Any other thoughts on the legacy of January 6th 4 years later, Rob?
Well, on your last point, it's kind of like we were joking about the spirit of the White House, that they talk about it like it's its own entity.
Yeah.
It's like, if you own the Capitol building, is it like capture the flag and so the government's now yours and we throw out all the rest of government and someone shows up and goes, oh, keeper of the Capitol building, what are your instructions? So we all know that they had no plan and that that's cartoonish. And then speaking to the FBI stuff, because it's such a funny story, that their best excuse now 4 years later is that they had 16 informants, but they just forgot to collect the information. They knew it was a good idea to have informants, but you know, they're not so good at their jobs to actually call them up and ask for the information they've hired them to go get. And then also, you know, I made this joke on Run Your Mouth. It's like, I've watched enough Mission Impossible movies that they don't give people their mission instructions and go, if you're caught, we'll take all accountability. It's like, It's like the idea that they gave these guys instructions to go provoke the insurrection, and then they go after the fact, yeah, that absolutely, he was working for us. That was our plan all along, was to try and get domestic terrorism titles so that we could more police the United States and get rid of Donald Trump. Absolutely. They were like, of course there would be plausible deniability. I mean, the fact that you're confirming 4 years later that there were 16 people who are off the books working for the FBI, some of which were actually inside of the Capitol building, of course, without instructions. Yeah, because you wouldn't have a paper trail of those instructions. So to me, the fact that they had 16 informants there on the day who they did not collect information from to prevent it, I think is about as big of a government admission as you could possibly get of, yes, we were involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost worse for them than just admitting that we orchestrated the whole thing. Like, you really want us to believe that you're that stupid, that you're like this bad at your job? Wouldn't it be better for us to just believe you're evil? Yeah, I don't know. It's very bizarre. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, something that is going to revolutionize your skincare routine, and that is vanman.shop. If you're tired of the same old synthetic junk and are looking for products that actually work, let me tell you about the natural products from Van Man. First off, let's talk teeth. This isn't your run-of-the-mill toothpaste loaded with fluoride and foaming agents. No, sir. We're talking about a naturally derived hydroxyapatite. I hope I'm saying that right. Probably not. It's packed with all the minerals your teeth needs to remineralize and stay strong, while the rest of the market is slinging synthetic nonsense. VanMan.com is keeping it real with zero fluoride, SLS, or glycerin. This tooth powder is all about giving your mouth what it deserves, pure, effective care. And then there's tallow. Let me tell you, this is the best moisturizer you'll ever find. Our skin's oil shares the same fatty acids as tallow, making it a powerhouse for hydration. So if you're done with the chemicals and you want to embrace natural care that actually works, head over to vanman.shop/problem or use the promo code problem and check out their line of natural healthcare products. Your skin and teeth will thank you. vanman.shop/problem. That's the site to go to check all this stuff out. All right, let's get back into the show. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about, because this is more on the theme of which is a glorious theme and still will be until we'll probably have to move on from this at some point after January 20th, but not before then. But on the topic of post-election post-mortems. There's a clip of Bill Maher that's going super viral from his latest podcast where he had John Cryer on, who I guess is he's the actor from 2.5 Men. Looks a bit different these days, but the two of them, he's like just evidently like a very woke Hollywood guy. And it was just an interesting exchange between him and Bill Maher. So let's go to that clip. 2.5 Men guy and Bill Maher discussing the recent election.
I think the whole country, even unless you're like stupid woke, I hope you're not, but you know, it is Hollywood.
Somewhat stupidly woke.
Okay. The whole country was like, I mean, I think the biggest issue for the election, one of the biggest ones, was Democrats pointlessly, totally just punted on immigration and let anybody who wanted to walk in for 3.5 years did. And, you know.
Well, I think they would probably disagree that people walking in probably felt like it was a little harder.
No, actually, there's a great 60 Minutes piece on it where the border, I mean, you don't get 8 million people here by making it difficult. But there's they're just, I mean, you see they're walking through and the border guys are just watching them.
I just already love just the level of conversation on these type of podcasts. It's just so many like levels beneath the worlds that we, dip our toes in. But there's almost like two things being conflated here between, he's going like, oh, they made it really easy to just walk into the country. And then the actor is like, well, I mean, I don't know, ask one of the people who came here. I don't think they would say it's very easy. And there's almost like two different things that are being conflated here. I don't think anybody is arguing that the journey to the southern border wasn't immensely difficult for many people who made that journey. In fact, I would argue probably difficult for everyone. There probably isn't one case of anyone walking into the United States of America where they walked up to the border and they went, man, that was the easiest journey of my life, was getting from wherever I started to this point. They go through like a pretty horrific, path to get here. The question is more like how easy we make it at that point going forward. Like that's really the discussion around immigration policy. It doesn't really matter if you started from South Africa and built your own boat and rafted over and then walked up all of South America or something like that. The point is that once you reached our southern border, it was very easy to enter the country. That's kind of the point. Anyway, let's continue.
Do it. They're just watching them walk past. You never saw that?
I did not see that.
See, that doesn't get in the liberal media. That's the problem, is the bubbles we live in.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had it right. Like that kind of stuff is what lost the election for the Democrats. It's in all.
Maybe part of it. I don't know. I think a lot.
They have polling on it.
I think it's inflation. I think Americans hate inflation.
That certainly was
They hate
part of it.
inflation, they hate riots, and they hate black women.
They don't
and they hate trans
oh
people.
God, John, we're not
Dude,
gonna.
they just spent hundreds of millions
They
of dollars
don't hate
demonizing
black-
trans people. And that's
Oh.
disgusting.
Yeah,
That
we
is-
shouldn't talk politics.
Okay, we shouldn't. We
I mean,
shouldn't.
this
Great. We don't
Yeah.
have to.
All right. So it's always, I don't know why, it's always fun for me to see like there's this dynamic with Hollywood leftist types where and it's true in general with with former leftists, let's say. And at this point, I think is a huge part of the Trump coalition, to be honest. But it's always like they're with the craziness until the craziness hits a point that's too crazy for them. And then they go, okay, that's my line, you know? But it's always funny to see them like outflanked to the left, where he's like, look, I'm trying to be a leftist too, but like, I can't be this retarded. So we have to do something. And so I just find this funny to be like a little representation of like, because I do wonder to myself sometimes, like, what is, you know, Rob, we've seen a lot, right? There's almost been this separating of, what is it, the wheat and the chaff? How do I say that correctly? You cut the grass and the snake show or whatever. So there are
Throw out
almost
babies
like
with bathwaters.
yeah, something like that. So there's almost like these two different camps that you could see, right? And there's the camp of, say, like Democrats who want to throw out the woke stuff after the defeat of Kamala Harris. They're like, we got to get rid of all this woke insanity. It's turning people off. Now, as we've said many times on the show, I find this to be a very shallow, surface level analysis of what happened in this election, but they at least acknowledge that. And then there's the people over here who are like the true believers. And they're like, what do you mean throw off the woke stuff? I'm all about woke stuff, you know, like I believe in this. I thought we all believed in this. And there is, as bizarre as it is, look, obviously the person who's like, hey, we should throw off the woke stuff is clearly much more tethered to reality and frankly more sane than the people saying, no, we should double down on it. I must admit, though, there's something I respect about the true believer. Like, there's just...
All right, wait, hold on a second.
Well, no, I'm not even saying this guy. I'm just saying more generally before we get into this guy. Just like more generally, there's something about the person who's like, wait, I thought we all really believed in this stuff over the last year that you... Like, AOC will take the pronouns out of her Twitter bio like that. It's like, what? We're not doing that anymore? That's not the path to power? Okay, what's the path to power? You tell me and we'll go pursue that path. But then there's other people who are like, but that's transphobic. You're transphobic now, AOC. I'm just saying at least those people believed in what they said. Not applying that to this guy specifically.
This stupid queef is a male feminist type guy. He's found the weakest path to a personality, which is, hey, if I take this banner, does that instantly make me the nicest person in the room? And so that was granted to him. It let him keep his job, and now he'll go anywhere and preach how you're just not being kind because you don't share this lame perspective, which, by the way, isn't kind. You're talking about kids that will be forcefully mutilated and figure out later in life that didn't help treat their depression or autism, or
100%.
that they were just going to grow out of it anyway. So it's just it's this liberal thing that as long as you're into whatever, you know, is the most advanced degree of socialism, then you're on the side of niceness and being inside these reinforcing circles that just agree with you. Hey, government should give free healthcare to everyone. So anyways, I've interacted, like, especially peak COVID. I mean, not peak COVID, even peak COVID. Yeah. Cause that was like people who bought into it. The amount of comedians that had this personality for a stretch of life where it was just brutal. Safest to be on the side of the regime. So if you're not keeping COVID, it's because you're an idiot and you don't care about grandma, or at the chief of, hey, you can't use not nice words. I remember some of these personalities at the creek in the cave, and
I remember it well, Rob. Oh yeah, it was brutal, dude. And it's especially as a comedian, it's just particularly disgusts me because you're like, it's the antithesis of funny, and also just being a man, whatever. But I love that the guy goes, well, I think a lot of people just really don't like inflation. And then he goes, and riots. And then he says, and black women. And then he says, and trans people. Which is already, first of all, just to pick this apart a little bit here. Number one, it's insulting to inflation. Like, it's insulting to inflation to put it in this list as if it's just one of these things that people arbitrarily don't like. Much like it's kind of a like the same way they're bigoted against black women and trans people, they also don't like inflation. It's like, again, talk about a privileged way of looking at the world. Like inflation is, oh, you know, you and your family's dreams falling further from your grasp. That a silly little thing like that. Number two, the riot. What riots? What's he talking about? He's talking about in the summer of 2020. When Donald Trump went on to lose the election? Also, by the way, who likes riots? Like, what? Like, who likes the anyway, okay, who's like on the side of a riot? Yes, obviously they're bad. Yes, killing, you know, dozens of people and assaulting hundreds of people and causing billions of dollars in property damage and terrorizing people who are just trying to run a business is bad. That's not good. But then look, I mean, this stuff at the end about, oh my God, I've been dealing with this on Twitter recently because there's so many people, you know, whining at me to condemn anti-Semitism. Why won't you condemn it, Dave? And, you know, it's just all of this stuff about like, look, the real problem here that progressives have, and they've had this for quite a while now, is... And it's an unfortunate thing. It's bizarre. You remember at the beginning of COVID, Rob, we used to talk about this a lot, how bizarre it was that people would get pissed off when you gave them good news because people were so attached to like the catastrophe of COVID that if you went like, oh, hey, look, all these new studies coming out indicate that the death rate is like a fraction of what they originally guessed the death rate might be. And they'd get pissed off and you'd be like, wait, we should all be together that it's good that the death rate's lower than we thought it might be, right? That's good news. You want to live a life, right? Like, what? And it almost seemed like at a certain point people didn't want to. And in the same thing, it's a real problem progressives have had, and it has been so damaging to a generation of young people who were brought up in this woke garbage. The real problem they have is that the racism in this country just does not meet your demand for it. Like the supply just isn't there. I know you want it. You have all this demand for like a racist country. It's just, unfortunately, the supply isn't there. We're just not that racist of a country. We're actually, even today, even after kind of the backtracking of race relations, mostly due to woke progressives over the last decade, we're still a remarkably not racist country. That's the truth, okay? The truth is that if you go almost anywhere else in the world and you see the amount of kind of racial divides, tribal divides, sectarian divides, they dwarf the United States of America. Go not that far from the USA. Go to the Dominican Republic and take a look at the prejudice between light-skinned Dominicans and dark-skinned Dominicans. It is, you've never seen anything like it in your life in the United States of America. And again, like, so this idea that like the Trump voters are so motivated by their hatred of black women just isn't true at all. And on the trans stuff, I know we've said this a million times, but the fact of the matter is, and this is the truth, if they had never brought it to kids, there never would have been enough backlash to even register. And none of these commercials that Trump ran would have ever been run. You know, if it was just, look, most people, let me say this, all people who are not mentally ill know that there is a biological difference between men and women. 100% of people. Nobody genuinely believes you can go from being a girl to becoming a boy. No one actually believes that, except some mentally ill people. Any more than people believe you can go from being a boy to being a tree. It just can't happen. You can live as a girl, in a sense. Like you can dress up like a girl and call yourself a girl and ask other people to refer to you as she and her. And lots of people are willing to do that. Lots of people are willing to not be a dick. Now, there are some other right-wingers out there who maybe would never do that and wouldn't call you by your pronouns, but that's about it. That's about as much political backlash as you were going to get if it was just adults doing what they wanted to do with their body. The issue became when you started aggressively pushing it on children and then taking steps to transition children. That's what the issue is. And so again, they don't ever want to say that and actually defend it. So the answer is just like, well, why were they running these ads against trans people? Oh, because they hate trans people or something like that. It's like, no. It's because they wanted to protect children. Now, if you want to take on that and you want to actually have that argument, fine, have it. But that's what the whole thing was about. None of this other nonsense. It's not just like, oh, Americans just subjectively are so bigoted that they hate black women and trans people and riots and inflation. It's quite a list. All right, listen, we got to wrap up the show there. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll catch you with a brand new episode tomorrow. Peace.